ladies and gentlemen. I am Robert Kinzel with Knowmium, and welcome to another Business Casual webinar. Today, I'm joined with Brandon Butler. Brandon is a financial editor here in Hong Kong, and I'm going to be interviewing him about what brought him to Hong Kong, what is financial editing, what does he do, and what's going on in his future. So just a little, thank you for being here, Brandon, first of all.
Thank you, Bob. This is fun. Cool.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
So just a little bit of background about Brandon. He is a financial editor with the China Construction Bank International Securities, and he originally had a master's in TESOL, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages. He's an American that's been in Asia for 22 years. And I just want to ask first about your history. Sure. What brought you out of the United States? What happened first, second, third to bring you here to Hong Kong?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It's a really strange path that I took to get here to Hong Kong, I would say. But I decided 23 or so years ago to just go to Asia to teach English as kind of an adventure, as many of us English teachers have done. And one thing led to another. I really liked living overseas and I liked teaching, so I decided to pursue a further education in that field, and then I got better jobs teaching at universities and things like that. And then eventually I moved to Seoul, the capital of South Korea. So when I was there, I started making these connections with government offices and businesses. So I started doing a lot of writing and editing. And I was still teaching, but I started kind of sidelining over into this other thing to fill time and to expand my knowledge and career potential, I guess you would say. So eventually I had enough experience where when I heard about a job in Hong Kong as a financial editor, actually the guy who was doing the hiring was familiar with my writing because I was kind of blogging, and he knew that I was a writer and an editor, and I had published some textbooks in Korea. So he thought I might, even though at the time I didn't have a finance background, he thought I might be capable of that particular job. So I got it, and I convinced him to give me a chance and moved over here, and I started doing financial editing, which was a new field being in finance, but the editing part was very familiar with me. So I just had to kind of come up to speed on the financial aspect of it.
Okay. And you're a musician too, aren't you?
I am. I kind of as a hobby, as a younger man, but for a short while I turned that into a kind of, I would say, professional thing. So I played drums for 3 years full time, actually.
Nice.
With a band, and we actually, my one stint outside of Canada, edit that out maybe. My one stint outside of Asia was to go back to Canada with my band, which formed in South Korea. But yeah, we did music full time in Canada for 3 years.
Nice.
And then gave up on that and came back here.
Excellent. Just like we don't edit out anything. We want the real you, even the miss.
If I burp right now, is that okay?
If that's how you feel, right? We want the raw Brandon Butler. So, okay. So, financial editing is something where I work with a lot of financial clients, banks and insurance companies.
Yep.
And I've also taught them in the past as well, different universities in Korea and also in the United States. And so I know bridging those two is not always the easiest, but if you're good at one, hopefully you're good at the other, right? You haven't been fired yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so my familiarity with really business writing has a little bit to do with editing, because of course if we're going to send an email, we need to make sure it doesn't have a bunch of mistakes in it. Run it through spell check or grammar check or whatnot. Grammarly is great software we recommend to people.
I know Grammarly.
Well, do you use it?
I don't use it at work, but I occasionally have come across it in my personal experience, writing or blogging or something like that. But I don't normally use it, but I think it's a great tool. I think my grammar is so perfect, I actually don't need it. I was just kidding. By the way, do you know that's a Ukrainian company?
I did not know that.
And my ex-girlfriend Valerie, she's Ukrainian, and she told me that was started by Ukrainians. It is a really amazing site.
Grammarly. So a country that doesn't have English as a first language created software for people have English as
amazing, right?
maybe, first or second language or third. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I was really interested in financial editing because I had an idea of what that means. And now here at Knowmium, we do writing courses where we're looking at email structure, we're looking at language, how to turn sentences from being too formal into positive but still keeping that meaning, right? How to ensure people are getting our clear message quickly, especially if they don't read the full long email, right? So I have a lot of experience with writing and some editing in my past, but for financial editing, can you just take us through what are some of the key points that you and other financial editors really do when you're at work?
Well, the number one goal is the same as what you just talked about. You have to make the reader want to read it and finish reading it. That's the number one thing, right? So, the interesting thing about financial the difference maybe in financial editing, especially in my niche, which is working in Asia, is that I work with analysts who are not native speakers. Now, if I were a financial analyst in New York City, I would have more of a mix. I would work with analysts who are some maybe native speakers, Americans or North Americans or what have you. But being in a big city with an international market, I'd probably have some analysts who are also from whatever, Europe or Germany or Italy or India or Spain or Japan, who knows. So, but here I'm working pretty much 100% with financial analysts who are not native speakers. And so I would say my primary job here is to, number one, clean up their writing, because what is financial writing first? We're kind of skipping ahead, or I'm skipping ahead. It's I work with analysts who evaluate companies, and in my case, Chinese companies. So what they do is they are writing about what is this company worth, what is its stock price worth, what is its market cap worth, so that investors will have solid research to make decisions on whether this company is worth investing in. So basically, I work, just every day I'm working with a big team of Chinese and Hong Kong Chinese and mainland Chinese financial investors, and they are writing about Chinese companies and Hong Kong companies. And I get a report, and it basically, depending on their skill level of writing in English, some can write perfectly almost. I am fixing all the mistakes, grammar, punctuation, things like that. House style is a big thing. Every house, every bank, by house I mean bank or big company, every house would have its own style for abbreviations and punctuations and the way that we use certain industry jargon, okay? So I have to make sure that all of the reports that go out of our company match that style. Okay, so that's actually the core job. But when you get back to the writing part, which you're talking about, is when a report about a Chinese company leaves my office, we have to make sure that investors want to read it. So not only does it have to have the correct style and be free of errors, but it's got to be a little bit interesting too, right?
So how do you take this, what sounds like a pretty dry report? How do you make this
exactly?
Now, would this be interesting only for the reader who's in this industry, or could you make it interesting to just the average
guy?
Well,
that's a good question. I have a very small team. I have one other English native speaker on my team, and he's a really amazing writer, and I learned a lot from him. I'm more of a technician, where my style is fix the mistakes, make it clean and concise. He has more of a style where he also wants to make it, let's say like this, it's going out to investors and industry people, right? So it doesn't really have to be fancy schmancy writing, but if it is a little bit creative and stylistic, then the investors are going to read it further and deeper. So what his philosophy is, and what I have kind of learned in my 3.5 years doing this job, is let's say, take a really dry industry report and try to make it read like it might read in The Economist or some business magazine. So you want to have a little clever wordplay here and there, but you don't want to be flowery. You're not writing a novel or anything. But you don't want to.
You're using haikus in the middle unnecessarily, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you don't.
The bank is growing, just as my heart was for my long lost love.
Exactly,
right?
we get that sometimes. I'm not kidding. So we sometimes have to bring it back a little bit, But so we're taking it's financial analysis. So how flowery and clever can it be?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want it to be boring either. So we try to come up.
That guy's going to the bank right now.
Exactly. His stocks just hit it big. So it's good.
It's a new motorcycle.
Yeah, exactly. But what was I saying?
The flowery language.
So we want to have a punchy title that engages the reader. Okay, one thing too that I think is important is the process of financial editing. At least in my house, in my company, and probably in many and most, but that's I could be writing for a financial magazine, so it's a little bit different. But the product that we write and edit, or mainly edit, but sometimes rewrite, it goes to our sales team, and our sales team is going to use that research for financial investors because they're trying to help sell these stocks, and our research would increase the investors' interest in these certain stocks that we think are good stocks, or our analysts think are good stocks. So it's a tool for a sales team, and a sales team has to have something that's engaging, not boring, right? It's just like a good salesman has a good pitch, and so our research needs to have a good pitch. So we have a clever title. We try to make the language engaging, use some idioms and things that are fun to read, not just so we get a lot of things from our analysts who are not native speakers that sound a lot like a senior thesis at a college or something. Like somebody's in a language class, they're really brilliant guys, these analysts, so their analysis is amazing, but their command of English is not so great sometimes. So we're going to make it sound like we want to make it where it doesn't sound like a university student has written a financial report for their teacher.
So it sounds like you've got so many working concepts because you have to have obviously the command of English and editing, but you also have to have the industry jargon specific to each bank or house. You've got to have the perspective of salespeople, perspective of the reader.
And taking a lot of things into consideration.
That sounds very very complex.
And you cannot screw up the meaning of the analyst. But another thing that we're looking out for is, we're helping the analyst make their point better. And sometimes, what they wrote is a little bit confusing, and you're like, are you not quite sure if you're saying buy this stock or sell it? We do also have some interesting rules. Is like a report should have a call to action for investors. So what are we telling the investor? To buy this stock, to hold it, to sell it, to hold off and wait until it's a better value. So you can write a bunch of facts down about a company's valuation, but that's kind of meaningless for the sales team and the investor. The investor wants to know, what are you telling me to do?
What do you want me to do?
Right. And so that's one of our top priorities is every report should have a call to action somewhere in that report. So and then we look at, another...
So let me ask though, let me get into, I think something talking about the viewers or the listeners.
Yeah.
So let's say you have somebody who is not in finances as you were, maybe somebody who is in academics or they're teaching English. Is this a profession that you would recommend to other people?
Oh, yeah, I would say possibly. It's interesting because I have a lot of friends who do this job at different companies in different countries. and we all have really different experiences. So it kind of depends. In my experience in Hong Kong, maybe it's partly it's the market. It's a high stress job. Mistakes are fatal. They can have legal consequences, which is another thing I'd like to just mention before we, eventually it's the legal compliance and trading thing. So there's a lot of stress and pressure. So like my team, we kind of do everything from start to end, and we work long hours and we work weekends, and so it's a really stressful job. I have friends who do the same job. They are financial editors in other countries, and other companies, where the pressure is a little bit lower, because what they do is they clean it up, proofread it, they make sure the argument is sound and makes sense, the English makes sense, but then they pass it off to another team that would kind of handle the legal issues maybe, and making sure that everything is legally compliant. In my particular company, there's a little more pressure on us to make sure that,
to know that you're following, that you're compliant.
I don't want to say that they don't have to worry about that, but I would say, from what I know about our team, like we have a little more beginning to end involvement in the report before it goes to the public.
How much training did you personally have to get from legal compliance?
Oh, I go to training sessions several times a year, and I have to take really challenging quizzes, actually. So we cover anti-money laundering, we cover insider trading issues, and secrecy. So, you have the Chinese wall concept. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But it means even within my company, nobody outside my department can know what I'm working on that day until it's published and it becomes public information. So there's all these things you really have to worry about, and if the target price is you have to make sure that it helps to have a little understanding, which I kind of did, but I learned more and more as I got there, about financial statements and economic terms and financial terms, and kind of how a company's finances are structured. If you don't know all those things, you're going to miss some. It might be a typo on the analyst part. So you might have a target price for that company stock on page 1 doesn't match the one on page 2. They forgot to update it on page 2 or 3 or 4. Or you might see in a financial statement, you have line items valuing that company, and then you might see that 2 numbers don't match. That you learn that those 2 numbers always have to match. So you're spot checking for financial data, things like that. Let me
get to another question.
It's all over the place.
As a native English speaker, do you have other people in your company coming to ask you favors, hey, can you check something? Can you answer this question?
Not that often, but we do. We have a translator for our department, and we have translators for the CEO of the company and the president of the company. And sometimes they send us a bio or some marketing materials, and they say, can you fix this up for us? So yeah, we do that.
So people aren't coming around oh, hey, I see you're really busy, I need you to look at something. They're not interrupting you too much?
That happens every now and then, but not very rarely. But it's really weird. There is the financial reporting season for Chinese companies, seasons. So quarterly, we get really busy, and then say at the half year, when all the companies are reporting their half year financial performance, we get slammed. So we go from having 2 or 3 reports a day on average, I would say, to having maybe 15 reports in one day. And we do IPOs. So we have analysts who are, they write these 100-page reports about companies that are about to IPO. And we have to edit those sometimes in addition to our analysts doing company valuations. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We have economists on our team. We have strategists who are just looking at the global economy and the Chinese economy, not specific companies. But so we're getting reports all the time. Here's what here's what our company expects the Chinese economy to do in the next couple of months, in the next quarter, in the next year.
All right, so what's the most humorous or strangest thing that's happened to you or that you've seen happen in this line of work?
Well, there's a couple of different things. Okay, but you said the most.
I think we just have time for one.
Okay, well, we cover a lot of sectors, technology, auto sector, real estate, consumer goods. We cover all these different sectors in the Chinese economy. But I think our most interesting that my team gets, and we have a good laugh at every now and then, is we also cover pharmaceuticals, Chinese pharmaceuticals, but that includes Chinese traditional medicine. So sometimes I get reports that are about there's a shortage of donkey hides in China. So there's this Chinese medicine that's made with donkey hides or some organ of a donkey, or they don't get into the weird stuff like endangered animals, but we still get into some weird stuff. So there was apparently last year or 2 years ago a huge shortage on donkeys. And so you're just reading these kind of crazy things that you're like, wait, is that based in reality and world economies? You know, this is definitely a very China-specific thing. But anyway, so yeah, we just read some kind of wacky stuff like that sometimes.
So we'll put Brandon's information in the comments of this video. If you're in need of donkey hides or donkey hide information, he is the man to talk to.
I know where to get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So Brandon, before we leave, you have a long history that's brought you here.
Yeah.
And your history's continuing. You've got another project coming up. Would you like to tell us what are you going to be doing in the near future?
Well, yeah. You know, you asked me about would I recommend this job to certain people or to people who are interested in, you know, maybe with an English teaching background or whatever. But in my case, it's been an amazing 3.5 years, but I want to do something more creative. It was very rewarding and interesting, but I decided to do something creative for a little while. So I have resigned from my job, and I'm going to create a podcast, and it's called Rootabaga, and that's Rootabaga, not the normal spelling of Rootabaga.
We can link that.
Oh, well, yes, link that in later. That'd be great. Thanks. And so Rootabaga is going to be about, in my 22 years abroad or more, I've met some really amazing people who have just had unusual careers as expats. Like there's a lot of people who have unusual careers at home. I want to interview people who have had unusual careers in foreign countries and just find out like what compelled them to move halfway around the world and start some unusual job, like whether it's a French guy who makes violins in Korea, a pop star from Sweden who became famous in Korea. I know a Korean guy who was kind of a political exile for many years and a spiritual guru, and he travels the world teaching human design. I have all these like interesting people that I've met, and I want to tell their stories. So I'm going to take a break from financial editing and go around the world and find them, interview, and tell their stories in my podcast.
Sounds interesting. Sounds a little more fun than financial editing, honestly.
It's gonna be fun. Financial editing can be dry unless you're reading about donkey hides and things like that. But
absolutely.
But it's a good career actually.
Absolutely.
For the right person.
Well, Brandon, thank you for being here today, and we'll link your information and your new upcoming project in the comments.
Appreciate that.
Those of you watching online, if you have any questions, please post them wherever you're watching this, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and we can contact Brandon about donkey hides and other financial editing.
And podcasting.
And also, if you have a topic or a question you'd like us to cover in a future webinar, let us know. And if you or somebody you know would like to be on a future webinar, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you, Brandon.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Absolutely. Yep. Good night.